I'm home. Oh, you're quite late. Since you're a woman, make sure to have dinner ready on time. It seems like you haven't done any housework all day today, which really shows your level as a wife. Well, from now on, I'll thoroughly train you myself. I hadn't touched my smartphone all day, so I hadn't checked any notifications. I didn't expect my MIL to be here, so I was surprised. And there's one thing that bothers me. What does she mean by training me thoroughly? Could it be that she's gonna check on my chores every day? The thought gave me the chills. My MIL lives off her pension and the money her son sends her, and doesn't work. If she wanted, she could come over to harass me anytime. Yes, that sounds good. If you'd like, why don't we all go out to eat today? Let's do that. Then let's go out for some pasta. I'm in the mood for Italian today. Then, I'll go change, so please wait a moment. I said that and went into my bedroom. Honestly, I didn't want to go out to eat with them, but if I didn't suggest what they wanted, I'd hear complaints again. Having lived together for a year, I understood their way of thinking, so I quickly changed and decided to head out for pasta. That's what I thought. But the moment I entered my room, I was shocked and lost for words. There were no traces of my belongings, only my MIL's clothes and stuff were scattered around. What is this? Oh, I forgot to mention, from today, this will be Mom's room. Your stuff has been moved to the storage room. You know the attic-like space, right? I put it there. You, just a daughter-in-law, have such a nerve to use such a big room by yourself. I was completely speechless at the blunt words of the two. Who's paying the mortgage of this house, and whose name is it under? My MIL seemed to have no idea. However, I'm not gonna stay silent about this. My name is Elaine, and I am currently living as an investor. Previously, I worked as an IT engineer at a multinational company, enjoying a good salary and a free lifestyle. I heard you're quitting the company. Are you going freelance? Yes, I'd like to work remotely, and I'm thinking of investing in the future as well. You're really planning ahead, aren't you? Well, I'll see you around until you leave. At the age of 30, I quit my job to work as a freelancer. Then, while earning a living, I studied investing and, before I knew it, 3 years had passed. Now, through my real estate investments, I'm able to live on passive income. I feel bad having you treat me to such fancy steak. But it's my first time having such good meat and I'm happy. It's your birthday, so don't worry about it. It's a treat from me. I'm out with friends for my birthday too, so I shouldn't talk, but aren't you thinking about getting a boyfriend? A boyfriend? Everyone is starting to marry, and I've started to seriously consider it as well. Having passed my 30s, I had begun to think seriously about marriage. However, as I can live on passive income, I am not financially struggling. There's a comfort in being single and free, so I hadn't started serious matchmaking. There's gonna be a matchmaking party soon. Would you like to join? A matchmaking party? I've never been to one. I'm not that experienced either, and it's okay if we don't meet anyone we click with. We don't have to exchange contact info or anything. Why not just go and see? Alright, I understand. Since I needed to take action given my age, I decided to join the party that my friend was attending. It was a 5-on-5 setup, and the person sitting opposite me was tall and had a nice vibe. It was my first mixer, and though I was nervous, I reminded myself to relax and enjoy. You are very beautiful. Oh, thank you. It was love at first sight. To meet someone as beautiful as you, I really believe God exists. I am shy by nature, so I was a bit overwhelmed by the direct compliment. Though I planned to have fun, getting such direct praise was not something I was used to, and it suddenly swept away any composure I had. I have been a quiet person all my life and have never experienced a popular phase. Thus, it felt good to be praised so much. Since it was a mixer, I felt that the effort I put into my makeup was well worth it. Would you like to exchange contact information? I'd like to take you out for lunch sometime. Sure. Let's go sometime. We got along well in our subsequent conversation, and later went for lunch. The atmosphere was enjoyable throughout, and after several meals together, we started dating. Both thinking about marriage, we registered our marriage 6 months later. We began our life as a married couple. So, what about our new home? Do you have any vacant properties in the real estate you own? A vacant property? Actually, there's one in a high-rise condo. Really? That's awesome. Then, let's move there right away. He knew I was into real estate investing and wanted to live in one of the properties because it wouldn't cost rent. Indeed, I own the house and there's no rent, but it was bought primarily as an investment property. The location and the condo itself are fantastic, but honestly, I'd prefer to rent it out for profit. I understand my husband's feelings, but as an investor, it seems wasteful to live in it ourselves. But it's too big for just the two of us to live in, and a condo near the station would be fine, right? Why would you say something so stingy? We have a high-rise condo available, we should just live there together. Or, do you value profit over our happy married life? That's not it at all. But living in a high-rise is just a hassle. I want to live in the high-rise. It's your property, so why not live there together? What are you hesitating for? He doesn't understand because he's never owned real estate, but property taxes are more than just the mortgage, and they add up more than you'd think. The property tax on the high-rise I own is about $24,000 a year. If I'm paying that amount, I'd normally want to rent it out. But if we don't rent it out, we'll have to deal with high taxes and various other expenses. Will you pay for that? I'll pay that much. After our discussion, we agreed that my husband would pay me $2,400 a month. The timing of real estate investment is crucial, and sometimes you can rent for a high price because of the timing. Of course, when buying real estate, I consider its future value, but I felt somewhat shortchanged and wasn't too enthusiastic. However, there was no use complaining about a decision that had already been made. We started preparing to move right away, and began our life in the high-rise apartment. Since my husband is usually at work, I primarily have to take care of the household duties. The high-rise condo we live in has few rooms, but each room is incredibly spacious. So, daily cleaning was a huge task. Then, one day, while I was cleaning the house, the door suddenly unlocked. "I'm coming in." What? I was so surprised, I couldn't find the words. Only my husband and I should have had the high-rise card keys. I couldn't help but wonder why my MIL had the card key. Why do you have a card key? Before asking such questions, isn't it polite to invite me to the living room and offer some tea first? And yet, you seem incapable of even that. You're not up to par as a wife. I'm sorry. I apologized instinctively, but thinking back, there was no need to. Anyone would be surprised if someone entered their home unannounced. I reluctantly led my MIL to the living room and served her tea. "So, why do you have a card key?" "I only gave one to my husband. I'm family too, shouldn't I have a card key as well?" "It's not about that, how did you get the card key?" "My son prepared it for me. This tower has a gym and cafe, so he said I could use them whenever I like." "It seems you didn't want to give me a key." "This is actually the third spare key, so my son also has his own key." At that moment, I checked the drawer where the spare key was kept. The third card key, which I had put there, was missing, and I realized my husband had taken it without telling me. I understand his desire to give a key to his mother, but this is a property I own. It's unacceptable to do this without my permission. Is that so? However, could you please contact me before coming next time? I'm not always at home. You don't need to worry, and there's no need for you to be home all the time. I'll just come when I want, relax, and then leave. My MIL said this bluntly, and I was at a loss for words. Did she not understand what I was trying to say? I didn't know her well enough, and I didn't want her entering my private space uninvited. However, I hesitated to outright say not to enter when I'm not there, so I wrapped it in niceties. It's not about me worrying. I don't want to say this, but we've only met during our marriage introduction and at the wedding. For security reasons, Could you please visit only when I'm here with my husband? Then you wouldn't need the card key. Do you think I'm gonna steal something? Isn't that a bit rude to your husband's mother? I didn't mean it like that. However, that's incredibly rude. I'm really upset now. Could you correct what you just said and apologize? I'm sorry if I offended you, but I have my own points to make. Could you please return the card key? I'm astonished. Who do you think allows you to live in such a place? My son gave me the card key, and I will continue to use it. With that, my MIL left, taking her things with her. She did not return the card key, and a sense of frustration remained within me. I didn't doubt her, but I didn't fully trust her either. I regretted not saying earlier what would happen if I asked for a key to her house. Most likely, she would outright refuse that. But now, there was no point in dwelling on what she did. I decided to wait for my husband to come home and discuss the whole situation with him. Today, your mother used a card key to enter without permission. What's going on? Did you give her the third card key without asking me? Yes, but I heard you kicked her out. She called me, and I was really surprised. Don't treat my parent like a stranger. I didn't treat her like a stranger. But please, don't give out card keys without consulting me. This is our home where we live together. I'm not saying your mother can't come, but I do want some level of privacy respected. Privacy. What trouble does it cause if my mom comes? Don't say weird things anymore. We're family, so don't treat my mom like a stranger. Understand? That's just basic decency. After saying that, my husband went to take a bath. After that, even when I brought up the card key issue, he didn't respond at all. I was completely ignored by him all the time, and I let out a big sigh. However, as a security measure, I had installed sensors on the windows, doors, and other entry points. This way, I could tell if anyone entered my room. Although the sensors were primarily for security, they were set to notify my smartphone if my MIL entered while I was not home. If there was any problem while I was away, I planned to take back the card key. That was my intention. For about a year, she started coming over about twice a week, and half of those times, I would be out. It felt like she was timing her visits too when I was gone, but no major issues had occurred. Then one day, I had been out since morning dealing with real estate matters, and I wasn't gonna be back until 6 p.m. that evening. I'm home. Oh, you're quite late. Since you're a woman, make sure to have dinner ready on time. It seems like you haven't done any housework all day today, which really shows your level as a wife. Well, from now on, I'll thoroughly train you myself. I hadn't touched my smartphone all day, so I hadn't checked any notifications. I didn't expect my MIL to be here, so I was surprised. And there's one thing that bothered me. What does she mean by training me thoroughly? Could it be that she's gonna check on my chores every day? The thought gave me the chills. My MIL lives off her pension and the money her son sends her, and doesn't work. If she wanted, she could come over to harass me anytime. Well, that sounds good. If you'd like, why don't we all go out to eat today? Let's do that. Then let's go out for pasta. I'm in the mood for Italian today. Then, I'll go change, so please wait a moment. I said that and went into my bedroom. Honestly, I didn't want to go out to eat with them, but if I didn't suggest what they wanted, I'd hear complaints again. Having lived together for a year, I understood their way of thinking, so I quickly changed and decided to head out for pasta. That's what I thought. But the moment I entered my room, I was shocked and lost for words. There were no traces of my belongings, only my MIL's clothes and stuff were scattered around. What is this? Oh, I forgot to mention, from today, this will be Mom's room. Your stuff has been moved to the storage room. You know the attic-like space, right? I put it there. You, just a daughter-in-law, have some nerve to use such a big room by yourself. I was completely speechless at the blunt words of the two. Who's paying the mortgage of this house, and whose name is it under? My MIL seemed to have no idea. However, I'm not gonna stay silent about this. Did you move my stuff without asking? And I never gave permission for us to live together. It would be troublesome if you just moved in without asking. Who do you think you are? You don't have that right. My son said it was okay for him to move in, so you should follow that. You're just the wife, stop being so cheeky. Mom is living alone, so you worry, right? Plus, living in a spacious high-rise, there's no problem with the three of us. You're home doing nothing anyway, a small room for your stuff should be enough. The mention of a small room caught my attention, and I decided to check each room. Basically, there's 1 living room, 2 shower rooms, and 5 large rooms in this condo. 2 rooms are used by my husband as his room and bedroom, and I also use 2 rooms for myself and my bedroom. The remaining one, a bit smaller, was used as a storage room. My room and bedroom had been converted for my MIL, and only my stuff was crammed into the small storage room. It's understandable that my MIL, not knowing who owns the house, might act a bit high-handedly. However, it's strange that my husband would do this. Maybe he got carried away because I never complained about anything. Are you glaring at me? Do you have a complaint? You're living in a high-rise condo, you shouldn't be complaining. Yes, you're right. You shouldn't complain since you're living in a high-rise. You should just stop being selfish. What? What are you talking about? I'm the one paying $2,400 a month, aren't I? Why are you talking like you're the most important? Hearing my husband's words, I couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, he transfers $2,400 every month, thinking it was for the mortgage of this luxurious high-rise. There's no way such a prime, luxurious property costs so little monthly. If he seriously thought that, he lacks common sense. What are you talking about? That's not the mortgage, it's the property tax. What? What do you mean? Did you really think your son's earnings could afford such a luxurious high-rise? Let me tell you, it's impossible for a regular salaryman. I bought this high-rise as an investment property, and we're living here because he insisted to. So, at least he should pay the tax as maintenance costs. When I said that, both of them visibly shocked, their eyes widening in surprise. Don't tell me you didn't know such common sense? If $2,400 a month could rent such a place, everyone would live here. I was just paying the tax. That's right. And yet, you had the audacity to say such brazen things. Aren't you ashamed? This high-rise was that expensive. Let me also say to your mother, who do you think is the reason your son can live in such a high-rise? When I said that firmly, both my MIL and husband fell silent. What I said was not wrong, it was simply the truth. I didn't know that. I just assumed my son. Do you think it's okay to do anything just because you're in a superior position? That's not what I mean, but... Then, as the owner of this property, I am ordering you to leave this room. This is an order. My MIL thought my husband was paying for the rent to live here, using it as a shield to justify her unreasonable actions. If she used that logic, it's only fair that I can ask her to leave this high-rise. I can't deal with someone who treats their family like this anymore. This is my home, so please leave. You can't just suddenly say something like that, it's obviously impossible. Besides, it was just a joke. Don't take it seriously. I decided we'd live together, so it was meant as a little surprise, just a bit of mischief. If I've upset you, I apologize. I'm sorry. Realizing they were in a bad position, the two quickly changed their attitude. However, changing their tune now doesn't sway me. I cannot trust them as people. If I had been in a lower position, they truly intended to shove me into a storage room. It's definitely impossible for us to live together. Firstly, I have no obligation to support your mother. If you want to live in my property, you'll have to pay rent. The monthly cost is about $24,000. Wait, you don't need to say that. And since this high-rise has many rooms, give one to Mom. We're family, right? My back has been getting worse recently, it's hard to live alone. I can't even do the housework, and it hurts when it gets cold. That has nothing to do with me. Don't say we're family only when it suits you. Who ordered their family member to go to a storage room? Isn't that incredibly imprudent? But it was a joke. Unfortunately, I am not joking. I'm serious, so please gather your belongings and leave immediately. And you, we're getting a divorce. If you want to continue living here, that's fine, but we'll sign a lease and you'll start paying rent from next month. What? When I mentioned divorce, both of them were shocked again. I typically didn't want to cause a big issue with my husband, so I would often concede. It's not mature to vocalize every thought, so I often held back. That's probably why my husband didn't realize what I was thinking. These people who have always acted selfishly. This time, they crossed the line. If they thought they could continue to impose on me after this, they were mistaken. I'm not capable of enduring that, nor am I obliged to do anything for them. Many people talk bad about their husbands but don't divorce. I'm different because I'm financially independent. I can maintain the same standard of living even if I divorce you. There's no benefit to continuing our marriage anymore. All my affection is gone today. I see I've made you quite angry, but please reconsider. I understand you're upset, but making such a significant life decision in anger is wrong. I think if you sleep on it, you'll no longer want a divorce, right? I'm sorry for moving in without contacting you. I thought you'd accept it, but I was mistaken. I'll make sure to do better from now on. Well, if that's the case, please make sure to do better. And when he remarries, make sure not to make the same mistake with his next partner. No, but please don't make me repeat myself over and over. My desire for a divorce hasn't changed, and it's a fact that I want you to leave. If you want to stay, you'll need to sign a lease agreement. That's the condition. I doubt an average office worker could afford such a high rent anyway. I said this clearly. Then, the expression on my husband's face, who had been desperately trying to appease my anger, changed. He probably gave up on convincing me. His gaze turned hostile, and he stood up from his chair, approaching me aggressively. You think you can do this without consequences? Cut the jokes. Just because you've had a bit of success in real estate doesn't mean you can get carried away. You're just a wife, so you should care about your husband and his parents. Excuse me? You don't understand your place at all. Do you think you're someone important just because you have money? Don't be ridiculous. I'll give you some time to rethink this. Depending on your answer, you might end up regretting it, so be prepared. His voice rose, and I was a bit intimidated. There's a difference between men and women, and you never know what someone who's lashing out might do. However, I didn't want to end things being continuously pushed around. After all the selfish things he's done, and even now, lashing out in anger, it's unacceptable. Are you threatening me? I'm just giving you advice. Don't think just because you have money, you can remarry. Think about your age. No one will want you if you divorce me, and you'll lead a miserable life. Think about that and make a wise choice. If he really didn't want a divorce, I thought he might as well kneel and apologize for everything he's done up until now. I've been put through that much. But it seems he doesn't understand that at all. If he were smart enough to think about it, he would know that he can't live in such a high rise for just $2,400, and that family should be valued. Look, I think I'd be better off divorcing than continuing to support both of you. Just sign the divorce papers, and I'll handle the submission to the city office. Is that okay? You. I'm warning you, you won't understand until you face the consequences. You might have forgotten, but we have security cameras at home. They also record audio. Our entire conversation has been recorded. You were yelling quite loudly just now, it's all captured. Do you think you can threaten someone and get away with it? When I mentioned the surveillance camera, he glanced around the room. Perhaps he had forgotten that it had recording capabilities. I didn't want to escalate the situation by involving the police. I knew that being kicked out and divorced would be the most damaging outcome for them. However, mentioning the camera was an effective way to stop his tirade. Better make a decision quickly to avoid digging yourself deeper. Are you gonna sign the divorce papers or not? If not, I'll consult a lawyer and start a divorce trial. Also, decide whether you'll continue living here or move out. If you stay, you'll start paying a rent of $24,000 from next month." When I said this, the MIL whispered something to my husband. Then, after a moment of silence, he glared at me again and began to speak. "Fine, I'll grant your wish and divorce you. I'll move out of this worthless high-rise and cut all ties with you. Don't come crying to me when you can't find another partner. That's my line. If you come asking for help later, don't expect me to care." I just said that, printed out the divorce papers, and had him sign them right there. Since this is my property, I had my husband and Emile stay at a business hotel that night. Of course, he paid the costs. Now that he had signed the divorce papers, I no longer needed to let them stay in my house. The next morning, I submitted the divorce papers at the city office. Legally, we were now strangers, and I gave my ex-husband a week to move all his belongings out. He and his mother packed the bare essentials into suitcases and moved out. It seemed they didn't have the time or financial means to take everything. I heard they moved into a rather cheap apartment. Any belongings they didn't take within the week, I disposed of myself. Then, I quickly moved to an apartment in the city, and after cleaning the high-rise apartment I had lived in, I put it up for rent. It didn't take long to find a tenant, and now I'm living comfortably with a significant rental income. Having financial security enabled me to make the decision to divorce easily. Conversely, my ex-husband had relied on my income, so now he and his mother are struggling to make ends meet. Moving from a high-rise to a rundown apartment and lowering one's living standards is never an easy thing to do. Their days are filled with stress, and I hear they constantly argue. However, my ex-husband has a duty to support his mother, so he can't cut ties with her. They will likely continue to lead a difficult life together, but I plan to enjoy a comfortable life on my own. Family and life partners should support each other. When one starts exploiting the other or fails to cherish them as a partner, the relationship ends. I keep what I've learned from this experience close to my heart, and from now on, I aim to spend my time more meaningfully. They look like the very picture of happiness, don't they? I guess if we had kids, we might have had a family like that too. Daniel says, flashing a warm smile. His grin is soft, as though he's looking at something dearly beloved. At first glance, anyone might think Daniel, with that expression, is a gentle soul. But the reality is quite different. A small boy, surrounded by kind-looking parents, frolicking with joy. It's a shame for the kid, but I'm about to shatter their happiness. And I'm going to do it in the most terrible way. But all of this, every last bit, is Daniel's fault. If there's any blame, it should fall on Daniel, who betrayed me so cruelly. Their misery is all because of Daniel. My name is Betty Smith, a 43-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband, Daniel. I met Daniel through a friend. At the time, I wasn't particularly interested in romance, but Daniel proactively asked me out on dates. Gradually, I started to have feelings for Daniel and we started dating, which led to our marriage. We never had kids. It wasn't a fertility issue or anything. Daniel was always busy with work and was frequently away from home from the start of our marriage. With his frequent business trips and him being gone for days, we just didn't have much time to spend as a couple. Sure, if we had kids, we could have experienced the happiness that comes with an expanded family. But we were perfectly happy with just the two of us. Even without children, being able to live with the person I love most. It was more than enough to make me happy. I believe Daniel felt the same. But at the same time, I had my doubts. I didn't want to suspect Daniel, but he was indeed always busy. Another business trip? This is the third one this month, right? And this time you're going to be gone for a week? That day, when Daniel returned from work, he told me he had another business trip scheduled. From what I could gather, he had to travel far this time, requiring a flight, and it seemed he wouldn't be able to return for about a week. This was already his third trip this month. Sure, work can be busy, but there are limits. What's more, he's been working overtime daily, to the point where we, as a married couple, barely have the chance to see each other. Daniel, it's really odd that you're this busy. Isn't your company one of those infamous black companies? Maybe you should consider a job change. We could manage our finances for a month or two. I'm worried your health might give in at this rate. Not only daily overtime, but also frequent business trips. Clearly, Daniel's company is not normal. At this rate, Daniel might break down. As his wife, I feel it's my duty to do something about this. With this feeling, I tried to persuade Daniel. No, I'm okay. Work is tough, sure, but it's also rewarding. I'm sorry for being away so much, it must have been lonely. But, working is important for our life together, Betty. Daniel replied with a troubled smile. Indeed, having a job is essential for making a living. But does that mean there has to be a reason to push ourselves this hard? I started to question Daniel's words and the company he works for. Am I wrong? Is Daniel's way of thinking just common? Do I really have to continue my current job to support our household? In the end, no matter how much I try to persuade him, Daniel has no intention of changing jobs, so nothing changes and we continue to live our lives. As usual, our intimacy as a couple is quite minimal. I'm happy if we sleep in the same bed once a week. It's been this way since we got married. I'm sure the reason why we don't have children is because of that. In the midst of this, Daniel happened to have a day off, so we traveled a bit and came to a shopping mall in the neighboring town. Due to the holiday, there were many families, and every time I saw children happily holding their parents' hands, I couldn't help but sigh, wishing we could be like that too. Seeing me like this, Daniel made a face. Stop sighing, it's our day off. Why don't we go eat instead? Looking at the time, it was indeed lunchtime. We decided to go to a nearby diner after discussing it. As it was lunchtime on a holiday, there were many people. Sure enough, there were many families inside. A child, excited looking at the kids' menu. A child smiling, being fed a hamburger by a woman who seemed to be his mother. Every time I saw such happy family scenes, I couldn't help but think about why we don't have children, and all the unpleasant thoughts came to mind. I wondered if Daniel was thinking the same, as he quietly muttered while watching the families. Kids are cute and wonderful. I wonder what kind of child we would have had. Those words hit me hard. I might be taking it too pessimistically, but it felt like a jab at me for not being able to have children. I wanted children too. I wanted to give birth to a child with Daniel and build a happy family. All of this is because Daniel's job is too demanding. If he had considered changing his job earlier, creating even a little time for us, we might have become a happy family like those people. With those thoughts, I sighed at my own negative thinking. It's not Daniel's fault. Daniel is just working hard for us to live happily. Despite all that, look at what I'm thinking. Maybe I was so fed up with my own thoughts that the food brought to us didn't taste good. I felt like Daniel was looking at me with a displeased face. In the end, I couldn't even enjoy the rare outing with Daniel that day. Since that time, my relationship with Daniel became strained. There was something I felt towards our child, and unconsciously I started to distance myself from Daniel, but I had a feeling that Daniel was also somewhat avoiding me. I knew this couldn't continue, but I had no idea what to do. Because I didn't understand why things had turned out this way. Even when I tried to think it through on my own, I couldn't find an answer, so I decided to consult a friend who I'd known since my school days about the situation. My friend listened to my story sincerely. And, empathizing with my words, they reassured me. Betty, you're doing your best. But even so, I didn't feel any better. Seeing me like this, my friend looked somewhat puzzled, prefaced their words with, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but... and then told me something. That revelation left me feeling dizzy. I couldn't believe it. If that was true, then Daniel. From the day I talked with my friend, I started to distance myself from Daniel. My friend's words kept echoing in my mind. A few days later, during the day, I was walking through the residential neighborhood with Daniel. Suddenly, I said, I want to go for a walk. And though Daniel looked surprised, I was relieved that he agreed to join me. We passed by a certain house. We could see the yard of the house. There, a happy family was having a barbecue. A little boy was playing cheerfully, surrounded by a man and woman who looked like his parents. Seeing this scene, Daniel murmured, "That's like a picture-perfect family. Maybe if we had a child, we could have been a family like that." Towards the joyful family, Daniel cast a loving gaze. At first glance, one might perceive Daniel as a kind person. But the reality is different. Daniel and this family are irreversibly connected. That happy scene is undeniable proof of Daniel's cruel betrayal. That's why I had brought him near this house today. I watched Daniel to see if he showed any remorse, but it seemed he had none. If so, then no one would blame me for dragging him through hell. The child is innocent, but all of this is Daniel's fault. If there's someone to resent, it's Daniel. I made up my mind to punish the traitors. Yes, that may be so. But because of you, they're going to be miserable, I say, gazing at the family playing happily in the distance. At my words, Daniel tilted his head as if to say, "What are you talking about?" and muttered, "Huh?" He seems to be playing dumb, even at this point. What the hell is going on? They and I have nothing to do with each other, right? Sure, I must look like a weirdo for bringing this up out of the blue. But I don't intend to send innocent people to hell. It's because there's a connection that they're sent to hell. There was a tremor in Daniel's voice, or so it seemed to me. From Daniel's point of view, he wouldn't have expected me to say such a thing all of a sudden. Because there's no way his actions so far have been exposed. I was truly underestimated. Well, who knows? Let's just go home for today. We have no more business here, I said, taking Daniel's hand and starting our way home. Daniel, looking uneasy at my behavior, kept saying things like, "What the hell is going on?" and "Why won't you talk to me?" But I didn't answer. The old me would have consulted with Daniel right away if I had a problem. Daniel was a dependable husband to that extent. Well, now I realize that was just to keep up the appearances of being a married couple. When I got home, I didn't talk much, just had some dinner and then shut myself in my room. Daniel, looking anxious the entire time, kept glancing at me, but I pretended not to notice. Late that night, I quietly left the house. Daniel was sound asleep, so he probably didn't notice me going out. I slipped an envelope into a mailbox at a certain house. That envelope was my trump card. I'm sure the owner of this house will be surprised when they see the trump card I've prepared the next morning. All of this is the fault of the traitor. I've just decided to punish the one who betrayed me. If there had been no betrayal, none of this would have happened. Happiness wouldn't have been destroyed. With each step I take, I feel a tightening in my chest as I realize I've come too far to turn back. I can't pretend none of this happened. I can't go back. The next morning, Daniel and I were having breakfast together. It was Sunday, but Daniel had plans to be out of the house for work as usual. Just then, the doorbell rang. Who could it be, this early in the morning? Daniel, suspicious, got up from his seat to check the doorbell monitor. Then, the sight that spread before him made Daniel exclaim, "Why?" The people on the screen were the couple from the house we had visited the day before. A man, presumably the husband, his face red, spoke through the intercom. "Sorry for disturbing you so early in the morning. We have something to discuss, could we come in?" Watching the man, the woman turned pale, exclaiming, "Oh, hold on, please stop. Let's go home. We can't trouble these people." Apparently, it was the man's decision to come to our house, and the woman seemed to have followed him, trying to stop him somehow. Why are they here? What's going on? Why had they come to our house? In Daniel's mind, it seemed like their visit to our house was not a good thing. While nodding in agreement, I opened the front door. "You saw that envelope, didn't you? Please come in. Let's talk face to face." As I said that envelope, the man's eyes widened. Yes, it was their house that I had slipped the envelope into late at night. When I invited the two of them into our house, Daniel turned ashen as if flustered. Ignoring Daniel, I made the couple sit down and served them tea. Daniel, who could not digest the situation, kept saying,
"Why?"
The woman, who was eager to go home. And the man, looking at both of them alternately, his eyes full of determination. The cast was now properly gathered here. It was time for the revelation. "You came here because you saw this picture, didn't you?" I said, laying out the contents of the envelope I had taken out of the cupboard onto the table. The inside of the envelope were the same as what I had put into their mailbox last night. There were a lot of pictures. In each picture, Daniel and the woman were walking arm in arm in the city at night, looking very friendly. Yes, they were having an affair. The reason I knew this was because one day, when I was talking to a friend, she told me, "I saw Daniel walking arm in arm with a woman in the city at night." At first, I couldn't believe what she said. That night, while Daniel was in the bath, I checked his smartphone that he had left in the living room. His password was so careless that even I could easily see what was inside. There were text exchanges with a certain woman. It seems that the two of them have known each other since their student days and apparently were close even before I started dating him. They seemed to have drifted apart upon starting their careers, but they happened to reunite at a class reunion and apparently started dating from there. In other words, while he was in a relationship and even married to me, he was fooling around with another woman. This is unforgivable. With this thought, I hired a private investigator to track their movements. Then, the evidence started piling up. Moreover, she had a child. By calculating backwards from the time the child was born, it was discovered that the likely conception period coincided with a week-long trip the two had taken. All this while, I had believed Daniel's absences were due to his busy work schedule. But that was a lie. It seemed he was simply spending time with her, coming home late and frequently going on business trips. She, like Daniel, probably used the excuse of being busy with work to spend time with him, all to avoid arousing suspicion from her husband. This means, the child Daniel once looked upon so affectionately was his and her child. When I explained all this in my own words, the man's face turned beet red and he grabbed the woman by the collar.
"It's not like that. Everything she's saying is a lie. That child is yours, there's no doubt,"
the woman shouted out in desperation. But the presence of the photographs made it clear, at least the infidelity was a fact. The man's anger did not easily dissipate.
"I'm divorcing you. Be prepared,"
the man declared loudly. The woman was sobbing, pleading,
"Wait.
And
It's not like that."
And I let out a sigh, wondering what she thought was wrong. As I watched their dispute, I casually glanced at Daniel and noticed him breaking out in cold sweat, perhaps feeling apprehensive about the upcoming events. Of course, it wasn't just her who was at fault for the affair. Daniel too needed to face his consequences. It seemed the man was somewhat satisfied with demanding a divorce. His face still held the traces of anger, but he said nothing more and took his seat. It was as if he was passing the baton to me.
"Of course, Daniel, you will face appropriate consequences too, okay? Your actions are a clear act of betrayal. And you've been fooling me for years,"
I said, smiling slyly. When I first discovered Daniel's betrayal, I struggled to accept the reality and prayed again and again that it was just a dream, but once things started to progress, I didn't feel that way anymore, and all I could think about was sending Daniel straight to hell. My words made Daniel's face turn pale and he fell to his knees.
"Please, forgive me. I admit that I was involved with her, but it's you that I truly love. That's why even when she had a child, I didn't divorce you, and I wanted us to stay together as a couple. I would have been fine just being with you, even if we didn't have a child."
Suddenly, Daniel started saying things that were all too convenient. At that, Daniel's words made a woman's face turn beet red as she lunged at him, exclaiming,
"What's that supposed to mean?"
Ignoring her, Daniel continued,
"It was all just a fling with her. I was just under a spell. The only one I truly love is you, Betty. I don't care about the kid or her. As long as I'm with you, that's all that matters."
Normally, being told by your loved one that you're all they need would be something to rejoice about. But I couldn't believe Daniel's words anymore. After all, there was a time when Daniel undoubtedly looked at that boy with love. Because he clearly felt affection for that child.
You say you don't care about the kid, but that's a lie. You've been talking about having children for a while now. You've always wanted a child, haven't you?
You wouldn't make a face like that if you didn't want a child. You wouldn't say something like, "We're a picture-perfect family." For Daniel, having a child might symbolize happiness. But there's no child between us. Because Daniel has been prioritizing his time with his mistress over me for a long time.
I really don't care about the kid. I don't care about her either. All I need is you. Please, believe me.
No matter what I say, Daniel keeps desperately denying it. He really doesn't want to divorce. If we divorce, it will leave a mark on his record, and if his parents-in-law find out, they'll definitely be furious. They hate dishonesty, so if this comes out, they'll surely give Daniel a good talking to. They might even disown him.
It's impossible, I can't believe you. Who's been betraying me for years, having an affair behind my back? Who's been disregarding my trust, my feelings? And yet, you didn't want to have a child with me, but you had a child with your mistress without a second thought. There's no way I could believe you after all that. Let's divorce. I can't continue as a married couple with you anymore.
I told him clearly. At my words, Daniel looked desperate. If it had been the old me, it would have taken a lot of courage to even mention the word divorce. Because I loved Daniel that much. Despite knowing that, Daniel cruelly betrayed me. That crime shouldn't be forgiven so easily. On top of that, Daniel is trying to neglect even the child who undoubtedly carries his blood. If Daniel hadn't acted so irresponsibly, none of this would have happened. But to even abandon his child to protect himself is unthinkable. Daniel has to take the minimum responsibility as an adult. That's why I can't forgive Daniel here. Rather, I need to punish him and make him face his sins. And make sure he never disregards people's feelings again. The woman he cheated with, her face red with anger, was sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel, shaking off the woman's arm, threw himself at my feet in desperation. Desperately trying to hold on to me, he clung to my feet. Sighing heavily at the sight, I saw Daniel's shoulders shake. But even seeing him like that, I didn't feel the slightest inclination to forgive Daniel. Afterwards, we decided to divorce. Daniel was very reluctant, and we even had to go through divorce mediation. We had plenty of evidence of the affair, so the divorce was granted on the grounds of Daniel's responsibility. Then, I demanded property division from Daniel. Of course, Daniel's parents-in-law heard about the situation, and they were furious. They wouldn't even let him cross their threshold. He's now working day and night to pay for child support. The woman he cheated with was also served with divorce papers and apparently returned to her parents' house with her child. According to her husband, her parents are furious and she's going to be working like a horse with no time for leisure while they're around. Thus, we were able to properly punish Daniel for his terrible betrayal. To be frank, there were plenty of things that stressed me out, and I felt quite worn out. Nonetheless, I felt a sense of relief having been able to administer divine retribution for the betrayal that persisted for so many years. Since then, I've moved and have been living peacefully in a new place. I still meet up often with the friend who helped me during that time, enough to chat about how tough it was back then. Having experienced such a harsh betrayal, I've had enough of married life for a while. I guess I'll be living on my own for a bit. It's my life, after all, so I've started to think that's okay. From now on, I want to live for myself. You've taken the painkillers, haven't you? So you shouldn't be in pain anymore, right? Then, go ahead and vacuum. My husband's gaze was directed at the package of painkillers I had just swallowed. Just wait a little until the medicine takes effect. I'll get it done properly. I told him, to which he stood up with a conspicuous sigh. I'm not saying I want to switch house chores with him, he could at least wait a bit. As I was trying to hold back my sigh, a strong shock ran through my back. Falling to the floor, I looked up to see my husband, rudely propping one foot up on the back of the sofa. The throbbing pain had me speechless, Could it be that he had just kicked me in the back? My husband laughed coldly at my plight.
I don't care about your menstrual cramps appeals, just hurry up and vacuum.
My name is Sally, 27 years old. I am an ordinary housewife, living with my husband, Jacob. The story of our encounter goes back to when I joined the company where Jacob was working. After graduating from university, I landed a job in sales. Until I was able to work on my own, Jacob was the one who guided me as my mentor. Jacob was a good-looking guy with short hair, and customers were attracted to his appearance. He also had a way with words that closed deals naturally. In sales, successful people are said to fall into two categories: those with extensive knowledge and information about what they're selling, who can leverage that into their pitch, and those who can make the customers want to sign a contract for them, personally. Jacob was definitely the latter. At first, all I had for Jacob, who was successful in sales, was admiration. But when I failed to secure a contract and was feeling down, Jacob reached out to me. Gradually, I was able to confide in him, and as we went out for meals and spent time together, I began to develop feelings for him. So when we started dating, I was so happy that I cried, and when he proposed, I was so overjoyed that I was literally jumping for joy. Life after marriage was filled with happiness. However, even I have things that can make me feel down. It's the fact that I've suffered from severe menstrual cramps since I was a student. At first, I was using relatively mild over-the-counter painkillers, but my body got used to taking the medication, and it became difficult to go about my daily life without stronger drugs. When we first started dating, Jacob would change his plans to accommodate my period, and he would rub my back when I was in pain and complaining. I thought this would continue even after we got married. But I was wrong. My monthly periods. Jacob was just sighing all the time, watching me struggle to do housework without taking medication.
Damn. It's not like it just started happening in the past few years. Get used to it already.
He began to say that to me. We both work, but Jacob makes more money and contributes more to our living expenses. The amount is significant. I can't support both of us on my own earnings, so I put a lot of effort into doing housework. During my period, I would finish my chores while the painkillers were effective, rest my body on the sofa for a while, and then resume my housework. I do everything in order, but to Jacob, it seems like all he can see is me lying around on the sofa. No matter how much housework I do, there's never a single word of sympathy from Jacob. Then one day, we bought a new house. We had been living together in an apartment until then, but we bought a larger house so we could have a child someday. Jacob's parents are very sociable people who occasionally invite relatives for parties. Jacob must have thought this was a great opportunity to show off our new house, because he said we should invite the relatives to our house for the next party. Jacob, who has incredible initiative once he makes a decision, quickly contacted everyone with the date and time of the party, and immediately handed me a list of relatives who would be coming on the day. The list contained not only names but also ages, and detailed information about their food dislikes. I couldn't believe it when Jacob said to me in a grouchy tone that I should cater to everyone's tastes and he wouldn't forgive me if I bought ready-made food. The dislikes varied widely, and someone's favorite food was someone else's disliked food, so planning the menu was a struggle. After spending a few sleepless nights planning the menu, my period, which had been a little late, started. I took a painkiller, finished cleaning the room the day before, and decorated the room with flowers. I put out air fresheners and reviewed the flow of the next day's party in my head over and over again. And in the evening, I finished preparing for the next day's menu, and went to bed. Jacob was laughing loudly at the TV while enjoying his nightly drink when I was trying to finish the preparation taking painkillers. I remembered Jacob like that as I fell asleep in bed. Then, on the morning of the day, I woke up before Jacob, made breakfast, and while tidying up, I started cooking for the party. I kept moving my hands, staring at the clock over and over again. I arranged the finished dishes on the table and thoroughly checked the entrance, living room, and toilet. The effect of the painkiller was beginning to wear off, and I was gradually unable to bear the increasing pain. I sat down on the sofa. I wanted to just lie down on the sofa, but I had managed to do my hair and makeup well, and I didn't know when the relatives would arrive, so I just sat down. I turned my gaze to Jacob and saw him watching TV with a glass of liquor in his hand. Even though we have to greet all the relatives soon, he's already started drinking. I was about to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. Maybe he noticed my gaze, because Jacob turned and glared at me.
What's up? Are you trying to tell me not to drink this early?
No, not really.
Oomph. I get nervous too, you know. Besides, you're sitting there on the sofa so casually, you must be done preparing, right?
Jacob put down his glass on the table and started walking towards me. His gaze made me feel strangely nervous, and I had a bad feeling about it.
It's getting ready, but my period started. I've taken painkillers, but they seem to be wearing off, so I'm taking a little break. I'll get better soon.
At my words, Jacob sighed heavily and glared at me.
Don't play the victim because of a little stomachache. My mom never did such a thing.
Just after he said that, I thought Jacob was circling behind me when suddenly I was kicked in the back and fell from the sofa to the floor. By the time I understood in my head that I had been kicked in the back, I was already on the floor. It seemed to take a long time to realize what had happened. Ignoring me, Jacob flopped down on the sofa and unbelievably began playing a game on his smartphone. I had no idea what was going on or what the situation was. But I knew one thing: Jacob was enjoying his game, laughing without a single word of apology. As I tried to get up and leave, Jacob suddenly fell to the floor. I quickly looked up to see why Jacob had fallen, and there was Jacob's father, my father-in-law, standing behind the sofa. My father-in-law looked quite angry, and I couldn't look away from him.
What's going on?
Jacob, not understanding the situation, seemed flustered as he checked the sofa.
Oh, Dad. Did you just push me?
While picking up his phone that fell on the floor with him, Jacob asked my father-in-law.
I didn't just push you, I shoved you.
Huh? Why would you?
Hey, are you serious? What do you think you're doing, kicking someone in the back? Especially Jacob, she's your wife.
Jacob seemed a little taken aback by my father-in-law's anger.
Well, you know, I was drinking and got a bit carried away.
He tried to reply, but my father-in-law must have glared at him for trying to brush it off with such an excuse.
Don't blame it on the alcohol. No matter what, a man should never hit a woman.
What do you mean, no matter what?
It's just a form of discipline. Discipline?
Yeah.
She was taking a break on the sofa without even finishing preparing. I was teaching her that if she doesn't work, she doesn't rest.
It's part of discipline, right, Sally? I had no idea how to respond to his sudden question. I had properly finished preparing and was just trying to rest a little on the sofa. I had done my duty, so maybe I should just tell the truth here. Seeing my dilemma, my father-in-law turned his gaze to me.
Sally, is what Jacob's saying true?
I found myself unable to respond to my father-in-law's question. If I told the truth now, with family soon arriving, Jacob might get mad and become sulky. That would be unfair to the relatives who had kindly gathered to see our new home. I was trying to adjust to Jacob's words when my father-in-law addressed me.
Sally, your silence speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Sorry? Confused by his words, I asked him to explain.
If Jacob was telling the truth, you could have confirmed it instantly. But you remained silent. Does that mean there's something, or everything, wrong in his account?
I felt like he had seen through me. I opened my mouth to tell the truth. Everything's prepared. All that's left is to welcome the guests. It's just that I'm not feeling well today.
Ah? You're just on your period.
Jacob abruptly cut in. I felt like crying at his lack of delicacy. I had carefully chosen my words to avoid such an explicit topic in front of my father-in-law, and yet.
Stop using your period as an excuse to not feel well. If you finished the preparations, just say so. I thought you were sitting on the sofa just to slack off because you hadn't finished.
That was Jacob's idea of the situation. He didn't even remember me saying earlier that the preparations were almost done. He hadn't noticed my hard work from the early morning, no, from yesterday, the preparations and the cooking. He hadn't noticed me taking pills to bear the pain and continue working. He had decided we would hold the gathering here and did nothing to help with the preparations or the cooking. And I did all of it, alone. Slowly, anger began to build within me. Listen to me.
She's always been talking about how severe her menstrual cramps are, but she still can't get used to the pain. Every month when her period comes, this is what happens. Dad, my mom wasn't like this, right? It seems I made the right decision coming over early to help Sally, since you, an inconsiderate host, decided to put on this gathering.
What? Inconsiderate? Me? Not Sally?
That's you, Jacob. If you decided to host this here and cooperated with Sally, you would have known how hard she worked on the preparations, how much pain she's in. And instead, what did you do? Did you start drinking before everyone arrives? The one who was slacking off was you, Jacob.
At my father-in-law's outburst, Jacob seemed to physically shrink back.
I didn't want Jacob to regret this the way I do. I've tried to educate you with that in mind, but...
My father-in-law pulled up a dining chair and sat down, heaving a deep sigh.
Your mother, too, she suffered from severe menstrual cramps, like Sally. I, as a man, with absolutely no knowledge about menstruation, and it wasn't a time when information was as readily available as now. And my mother used to say that your mother, who couldn't manage her own body, was a spoiled brat. Back then, I thought menstruation was something only people who couldn't manage themselves suffered from.
My father-in-law spoke slowly. As if reminiscing about the past, my father-in-law was speaking, his gaze fixed on some distant point.
Back then, painkillers were just for a peace of mind, and your mother, being a full-time housewife, was told by my mother to do all the household chores. No matter how much menstrual pain she was in, I couldn't let her rest. Then one day, your mother fainted. I immediately took her to the hospital, and the doctor told us the cause was endometriosis. Because of that, the dream your mother had of giving you siblings, it became impossible.
Jacob was listening and staring at my father-in-law's face.
Each person's body is different, and not everyone will have the same experiences. But if you ignore severe menstrual pain, it can lead to illness. Your mother did get sick. She was dealing with household chores, raising children, caring for her in-laws, and living with an inconsiderate husband. She had many sources of stress. She ended up infertile and couldn't get pregnant as she had hoped. I blamed it on the times and blamed my mother. But I was wrong. It was my responsibility to understand. It's a pain that we men can't experience, so I should have properly listened to your mother and accepted her as she was. I failed to do that. It was my fault. I regret not challenging my mother's views and remaining ignorant even now.
My father-in-law spoke in such a somber tone, gently supported by my mother-in-law. I was only able to nod to my mother-in-law, who just appeared having a sad smile on her face.
You did your best to understand me, didn't you? Despite your demanding job, you even helped out with household chores. And to think that you cut ties with your own parents for me.
My mother-in-law looked at my father-in-law with kind eyes.
Of course I did. I didn't want to burden you any more than I already had. I wanted the three of us to live happily. So, that's why I did what I did. But, cutting ties with my parents was a big decision. I wanted to avoid having to make such big decisions. That's why I've always tried to teach you, Jacob, hoping that you wouldn't make the same mistakes as I did. But it seems that I wasn't able to convey that to you at all.
Unable to bear the heavy atmosphere, Jacob interjected with a conspicuously upbeat tone.
Hey, don't you think you're being a bit too dramatic, Dad? In my memory, sure, there were times when Mom was really unwell and had to lie down, but I don't remember her ever having to lay down because of something as minor as her period. Is this some kind of nostalgia bias? Are you maybe just assuming it was harder than it really was?
My mother-in-law's hand, which was resting on my father-in-law's shoulder, quivered slightly. With a gentle pat on her hand, my father-in-law shot Jacob a stern look. You just forgot.
Of course, as a mother, they'd want their child from worrying. She tried her best not to let you see. But if it were just a matter of gritting your teeth and bearing it, it wouldn't be a disease. Your mother did have to lay down because she was suffering from period pain. I remember you coming home from school and saying that she was asleep again. I remember having a frank discussion with you about it. She wasn't just skipping out on responsibilities, she had no choice but to lay down because she was unwell. It seems you didn't even notice that. You weren't looking at Sally, and you weren't looking at your mother either.
Upon hearing Jacob's, no, their son's words, my father-in-law was visibly disheartened. I was at a loss for words, unsure of what to say or whether it was even appropriate to interrupt the tension. Just then, someone knocked at the door. Looking at the clock, it was 5 minutes before the time we had agreed upon, and as I clutched my aching stomach, I hastily answered someone. As expected, it was a relative. I quickly replied and dashed to the front door. Upon opening the door, all of our relatives were there, holding a bouquet of flowers arranged as a housewarming gift. I thanked them, laid out guest slippers for them, and led them politely into the living room. When all the relatives entered the living room, the atmosphere was still tense between Jacob and my in-laws. The relatives exchanged glances with each other. "What's going on here?" one of the relatives asked my father-in-law.
"Thanks for coming to Jacob's housewarming party. We were just in the middle of a little argument, so I apologize for the tense atmosphere."
What? Does arguing always result in such a mess of the sofas and cushions?
Well, Jacob here thought Sally was just slacking off when she was actually resting on the sofa because she wasn't feeling well. He pushed her off the sofa, so I was scolding him.
At my father-in-law's words, all the relatives' faces turned to disbelief, and a younger-looking woman among them came over to me.
"Are you okay? You must be tired from all the preparations."
When asked, I shook my head a few times.
"No, it's just that. I'm having really bad menstrual cramps."
"Just? What are you saying? Even workplaces have menstrual leave, you know? I've used it myself. The intensity varies from person to person, but if it's really bad, you can apply for leave at work. What does it mean that you can't rest at home?"
She said this and turned her face towards Jacob with momentum. What is it?" Intimidated, Jacob was met with cold stares from both his parents and all the relatives. Unable to stand their gaze, Jacob dashed from the room to his own room. Even though Jacob was gone, neither his parents nor any of the relatives went after him. It seems the relatives were aware of my mother-in-law's condition and even the men showed understanding, which was a relief. Immediately, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law came to me and apologized over and over for their inadequate son, while the relatives admired the newly built house and praised the home-cooked meal I had prepared. There wasn't a single person who blamed me. Everyone was moved by the meal I had served, and I received a lot of praise. In addition to feeling a bit happy, the effect of the painkillers started kicking in and I enjoyed participating in the gathering. After a while, I received an email from Jacob. It said he was frustrated that he couldn't enjoy this event because of me, and how unfair it was that he was the one in the doghouse with the family, with no one on his side. The fact that he chose to email rather than talking upset me. As I was pondering what to reply, my mother-in-law peeked at my smartphone. Upon seeing the contents of the message, my mother-in-law stood up immediately. My father-in-law, seeing this, asked her what's going on and my mother-in-law snatched the smartphone from me and handed it to him. As my father-in-law read the message, he also stood up abruptly.
"He still doesn't understand anything. We need to take him back and retrain him from scratch."
It was an unexpected turn of events, but my in-laws seemed serious. Soon, the relatives also started saying that they should retrain him, and it seemed like they were completely on board with the idea. After a while, as the relatives left one after another, my mother-in-law headed to Jacob's room and dragged him out. Both his parents gripped his arms, and before he could protest, they took him away. About a week after Jacob was taken back to his parents' house, I received an email from him. He told me how my mother-in-law had been relentlessly teaching him about women's bodies, the struggles of menstrual pain, and that she even made him do housework while being taught by my father-in-law, assuming as if she was suffering from menstrual pain. He complained about how hard it was to balance work and housework. I couldn't help but chuckle reading his complaints. It seems like they've been retraining him from scratch, just as they told me. I thought maybe now he's starting to understand a bit of what I was feeling, and it made me smile. In the meantime, I am taking the time to confront my period pain anew. Encouraged by my female relatives who suggested seeing a gynecologist for my severe menstrual pain, I visited a clinic in his absence. The doctor advised me about medications and lifestyle changes, which was helpful. Above all, living a life without Jacob interfering was more comfortable than I had imagined. I could live at my own pace and even lie down on the sofa when I felt tired. It was a life where I could take care of my body. I found myself wishing I could live like this for a bit longer. One of the reasons was my mother-in-law's advice, but mainly because I wanted to enjoy this relaxed life. I didn't reply to any of Jacob's emails. A few weeks later, he returned to our home with my in-laws. My in-laws sat Jacob down at the dining table and pulled out a business card. It was a contact number of a lawyer, and I was shocked, thinking we were getting divorced right here and now. I was slightly overwhelmed, but my father-in-law spoke up quietly.
Sally, if he ever behaves in an unacceptable manner towards you again, feel free to contact this person for divorce.
The look in my father-in-law's eyes was serious, and so was Jacob's. During the time we were apart, it seems Jacob had quite a serious talk with my in-laws and promised to change his behavior. Since then, Jacob has kept his promise without breaking it, no longer acting arrogantly, and even willingly doing the housework, especially when I'm having a hard time with my period. His comments belittling my period and its pain have also gradually disappeared. Finally, I was able to settle into a calm life with Jacob, which was a great relief for me. From now on, I plan to live sensibly, taking good care of my body and maintaining my health.